What is up, everyone?
Hey guys.
Welcome to another Travel Therapy Mentor video. Tonight we're going to be talking about contract cancellations. This is something we have to deal with as travelers. And we get a lot of questions from you guys about cancellations. How often do they happen? What's the process? What recourse is there for companies and facilities for cancellation policies? Also about whether or not you should cancel your contract depending on, things popping up. So we want to talk about everything surrounding contract cancellations. We'd love to hear your experience with contract cancellations if you're a current traveler, or any questions you have about contract cancellations if you're a new traveler or getting ready to travel. So we got some exciting announcements that we'll get to after Whitney introduces us.
All right. Hey everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Whitney Aiken.
I'm Jared Kazazza.
And we are both traveling doctors of physical therapy. Many of you guys may know us as the faces behind the Travel Therapy Mentor page. We're on Facebook, Instagram. We have a website where we educate other therapists on how to become traveling therapists and educate current travel therapists as well. So every week or every other week or so, we try to bring you guys a new topic on something travel therapy related. And this is something we've never really touched on specifically, as its own topic is contract cancellation. So we wanted to bring you guys some information on that tonight, since as Jared said, we get a lot of questions. So Jared is going to share our video live in a few groups so that more people can join on with us tonight in the live video. If you guys are tuning in live on Facebook, we would love for you to say hi in the comments. I see Nick is already on and said hello. Hi, Allie. Hi, Armand. Hey, Natalie. Thanks for those of you guys that are joining us live. We'd love to hear if you are a current traveler, if you're someone who's thinking about getting into travel, if you're a student, and we'd love to know if you have had a contract cancellation situation before. We asked this question earlier today in some of our Facebook groups. We have our Travel Therapy Mentors community group and our Healthcare Travelers on Fire group. And we got a lot of great responses there from some of you experienced travelers about all your various stories. So we'll share some of that with you guys tonight and talk about the ins and outs. But as Jared mentioned, we do have a couple quick announcements. We're excited to announce that we have some giveaways coming up in the next week, and then one later this year. We announced this morning on our newsletter. So if you guys are on our newsletter, you received this information. You guys are the first ones to hear about it. If you're not on our newsletter, let us know if you want to join our newsletter and get the most up-to-date information. But our giveaway next week, we're really excited. We're going to do a giveaway on our Instagram page. So if you're not following us on Instagram, we're at Travel Therapy Mentor on Instagram. We just recently reached 11,000 followers on there, so it's a really exciting milestone. Not quite as exciting as 10,000 was. That was pretty neat, that great even number there, but 11,000 is amazing. So we are going to be giving away something later this week, and we'll do an official announcement later this week so you guys can sign up for the giveaway. But what we are going to give away this time is free access for one individual, one therapist, to our comprehensive travel therapy course. This is a course that we launched about a month and a half ago. And this is a course that is going to take you through all of how to become a travel therapist and how to be financially successful as a travel therapist. The regular price for the course is $549. Now we did run a sale when we first launched the course, and we anticipate we might run some sales in the future again. But to celebrate our giveaway, that milestone of reaching 11,000, we're going to give away free access to one of you guys to join us in our course and in our private mentorship group for our course. So stay tuned for that if you want to try to win free access to our course. We hope you guys will enter that giveaway, and we can't wait to have one of you join us. And then we also announced that later this year and every year going forward for the foreseeable year, we're going to do a giveaway at the end of each year for people that have gotten recruiter recommendations from us, for travel therapy recruiters, and taken a contract with one of the people, one of the recruiters that we referred you to. So we've been able to, mentor and educate thousands of you guys and help so many of you guys get into contracts. And so we want to give back to you guys in another way with a giveaway for that. So we'll have more details coming soon on our Facebook and our Instagram page on how you can enter to win for the giveaway. But again, for those of you guys that were on our email list, you already received all the information for that. And for that giveaway, we are going to give away 4 different $250 gift cards. So it'd be $1,000 total in giveaways for 4 different people.
Yeah, and this also applies to anyone that has found a contract through our hot jobs list on our website. So there's a ton of people that are eligible for this. So you just need to go to the website, fill out the form, and you'll get an entry into the giveaway.
Yeah, and later this week I'll link to the form and all that and how you guys can get signed up to enter to win. So stay tuned for that. If you know for a fact that you are someone who has received recruiter recommendations from us in the past and taken a contract with one of our recruiters, you're already eligible if you took a contract in 2020 or 2021. So stay tuned for that. We're super excited to be doing these giveaways for you guys. So I see a bunch more of you guys have tuned in live. Hi, Dania. Hi, Kimberly. Hi, Carol. Hey, Jessica. Allie says, good day from Australia. She's doing her quarantine right now, going back and visiting family. So that's awesome, Allie. I hope that your quarantine is going well, and I'm sure you're ready to get out of lockdown.
Yeah, for sure.
Hi, Gina. Hi, Jennifer. Hey, Jeremy. Jeremy says, getting ready to do my first travel job. That's awesome. Hey, Jennifer. Hey, Nisa. And then I know a lot of you guys will watch this later on the Facebook replay. If you do watch later, we'd love if you type #replay in the comments. And for those of you that will listen later on our podcast, thanks for listening there.
Yeah. All right. So getting into contract cancellations, like I mentioned, this is something that all travelers need to be knowledgeable about because cancellations do happen. And, a very common question we get is how often do contract cancellations occur? And the answer is it really depends. There's differences in terms of therapists treating or evaluating therapists versus assistants. It seems to be a difference there in terms of cancellation rates. There also seems to be slight differences between different disciplines, PT, OT, SLP. But they do happen. In our experience, they're not that common. But like I said, everyone has a different experience here. We've talked to some travelers that have gotten several cancellations and they've traveled less time than we have. For us combined, we've only ever had one contract cancellation, and that was very early in our travel career. So not as often as some people think or some people might hear in our experience.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is one of the tough parts about being a travel therapist is the uncertainty of employment. So, we are risking a lot to put ourselves out there and decide that we're going to up and move our lives to a new location for a job. And so we really bank on this job working out. And every now and then it doesn't, and that's really tough. So there are certain policies in place to try to protect us. And we're going to get into talking about these standard cancellation policies. But we have heard, some horror stories from certain travelers that, had a really bad experience where having a contract cancellation really set them back financially or in some other way. They were inconvenienced. So it does happen, but luckily, like Jared said, it's not that common. In general, of course, for us, over doing this for over 5 years, the two of us, we've only ever had one contract cancellation. And what happened in my situation where I had a contract cancellation is they hired me a few weeks ahead of time. We already had agreed upon the terms of the contract, and I was getting ready to start within a few weeks. And then during that time between when I signed the contract and my start date, they found a permanent therapist to fill that position. Now, I was very fortunate that in my situation, they actually let me go ahead and start on my planned start date. And I had a 30-day cancellation notice in my contract. And they let me start and then let me do a full 30 days. And as we're going to get into talking about, they don't always have to do that if you haven't started yet. So I was really fortunate in that regard. We definitely heard a few horror stories in our groups when we asked this question of travelers who got canceled before they ever got to the contract and they didn't uphold the contract at all.
Yeah, one thing to mention here too is if you've, say you're a relatively new traveler and you just started about a year ago, your experience is going to be very different on this because COVID really changed a lot of things. There was a lot of contract cancellations in the beginning of COVID that were unprecedented, I guess. Like they were saying like act of God type things because no one knew what was going on. A lot of travelers, probably over half the travelers on contracts just got cut and let go at that time. So this past year has been definitely an exception. And so if you're a newer traveler, it might seem more uncertain than it really is. But the market's picking back up, things are getting better. I don't anticipate that will continue. That seemed to be just kind of a one-off thing that was unfortunate.
Yeah, they pretty much just when COVID hit, I would say 70% of travelers just got cut from their contracts completely. And when we get into talking about kind of what are the rules and what are the policies and whether it's a 30-day notice or whatever it is, in some instances they got cut immediately with COVID and it was really bad. And then some people were scrambling not being paid at all. And some of the companies were saying, we can't help you because we can't just, if the facility's not paying us, we can't pay you. It was really bad. But luckily, we have not heard of that happening in the last several months. So I think that we're past that. I think that all the uncertainty of that part of COVID is gone. I think they've gone back to pretty much what we would consider like the regular rules. So that's good news.
Yeah, so the first thing to talk about here too is what is a normal cancellation policy? Like what is a normal length of time if you want to end your contract or the facility wants to end your contract, how long do they usually give you? So in general, the standard is probably 14 days, so 2 weeks, just like most jobs, you give a 2 weeks notice, and that's both on your side and on the employer side, the facility side. We recommend, if at all possible, it's been a little harder over the last year just because there's a lot more uncertainty for both us as travelers and facilities, but we always recommend to try to get 30 days cancellation policy if possible. The reason being, 14 days does not give you a lot of time to find another contract, get things lined up, pack up your life and move if you have to do that to get to a new assignment. 30 days gives you a lot more time and flexibility to find something and get everything ready. So if at all possible, try to get 30 days. We recommend that to everyone. Almost all of our contracts we've ever taken have had a 30-day notice unless we were very confident that, if something happened, we would have another job lined up. And that's even more the case for couples traveling together like us, because if you only have 14 days to find 2 contracts, that can be really difficult.
Yeah. So that notice goes both ways. And in some instances, you might be thinking, well, what if I get to a job and I really hate it? And I want to get out of there as quickly as possible. Like, I don't want to wait 30 days to have to get out of there. And we'll talk about some different scenarios where you may have the option to get out of it sooner. But the biggest thing is, hopefully you've done a really good job during your phone interview to determine if it's going to be a good fit for you or not. And you've decided that it probably is going to be a good fit for you before you accept the job. So it's more rare that you're going to need to cancel. Really, it's more of a protection for you because they can cancel sometimes on a whim. Why would they cancel you? Typically, it's because they're trying to hire a permanent person and they're filling in that permanent person with a traveler until they can find a permanent person. And then they do find a permanent person. That's the most common reason why they would cancel you. Sometimes they'll have a major fluctuation in their caseload. So things can be kind of slow with hiring sometimes. Like maybe, in January they realize, wow, we have a lot of patients. We really need to get a traveler in here. But maybe by the time they advertise the position and they hire you, it's maybe been a whole month and now it's February. And by the time you actually start and you're there for a few weeks, their caseload has changed and shifted. And now they're like, wait, we don't actually have enough patients anymore to support this traveler. And then suddenly they might say, you know what, we don't need you anymore. We have had that happen, or we've heard of that happening before, but I would say the most common reason is filling it with a permanent position, permanent hire. And now the third reason would be if things were not going well. For example, if you weren't performing well, if you were not maintaining productivity, if there were some other issues there clinically. Now, of course, this is usually pretty rare. Hopefully, most travelers are doing a pretty good job clinically, or if not, they can work it out without having to have their contract canceled. And usually, if it's a productivity issue, you can usually come to an agreement with the manager, but not always. So we have occasionally heard of someone getting canceled for productivity, but usually, like whenever we've had a productivity issue, we were always able to work it out. We never got canceled because of productivity.
Yeah, productivity, you have to remember that it's in your best interest and the facility's best interest to work that out together. So they don't want to bring in a new traveler and train them, and you don't want to have to find a new contract. So most of the time you can work those things out if there's any issues there. Not always though, but yeah, the vast majority of the time it's going to be that the facility hired a permanent person to fill the position that you're already in and they don't need you there anymore. You have to remember that most travel contracts are for a temporary time until they can fill that position anyway, and maybe they fill it quicker than they thought they could.
Yeah, so you always want to find out when you're interviewing for positions and you're talking to your recruiter about a job, among the list of things you need to ask, which we have this on our website that you guys can reference, things that you'd want to be asking about the contract, for example, like the productivity and the expected hours and all that. You want to always ask, what is the cancellation policy? And they don't always write it on the contract, so make sure to ask so you'll know going into it. And if they say there isn't one, we have heard that before. We've heard sometimes they say they can fire you on the spot. That's a red flag.
For sure.
But typically they'll say maybe 14 days and sometimes 30. If it's 14, you maybe want to ask, would they sway on that? Could we get a 30-day policy written in? I would prefer that. You can always ask. They won't always say yes, but it's good to ask.
Yeah, and let's say you interview for a position, it sounds really great. They tell you it's only a 14-day cancellation notice. That's not necessarily a deal breaker. If the position sounds really good, I wouldn't turn it down just for that. But yeah, in almost every situation, if you can get 30 days, that's the way to go.
Yeah. So typically if something like those examples I gave happens and they need to cancel your contract while you're already there, you've already been there working for a bit, they might decide they need to cancel you, and typically they will say, okay, we're issuing you your 14-day or your 30-day notice. Sometimes you hear this from your boss, or sometimes you would hear it, they would go through the recruiter, and you might just get a call or an email from your recruiter saying, hey, they put in your notice, they're not going to need you any longer. So that's typically how it should go. Now, there are rare occasions where they might fire you on the spot. And I think typically these would be more likely to happen if there was some kind of concern clinically. Like if they felt as though you violated something or you did something wrong. I think it's pretty rare for them to cancel on the spot, like the same day, in other reasons.
And this is a bit of a gray area because there are situations too where a traveler might cancel on the spot, or, not say basically at the end of the day, I'm not coming back tomorrow. And that might be a situation where there's some ethical issues in the clinic that the traveler is not willing to, be involved in. So that happens both ways, but that is very rare. And usually that does not happen.
Yeah. And then as I mentioned, another way that sometimes would happen with me is occasionally they will cancel a contract before you ever get there. Sometimes this isn't the end of the world, but sometimes it is really tough because, for example, if they canceled it and you hadn't even started your move yet, or you hadn't started to set up housing yet, then it's like, oh, well, I guess I'll just find another contract, back to the drawing board. But if you had started to set up your housing already, or you already started to drive across the country, we have heard this happening, and that can be a huge deal.
Yeah, that is kind of a worst case scenario in my opinion. If you already have put like a deposit down on somewhere to live and you're driving across the country and you get a call that your contract is canceled, that is an awful situation because now you have to start over, go back home. Hopefully you can get the deposit back. If not, you lose money there and then start looking for a whole new contract, which can take a little while. So that really is a worst case scenario. And there's really, the part that's tough is there's not a great way to avoid that besides asking the right questions on the interview. Like, why do you need a traveler? Are you sure like the caseload is going to be consistent? Those kind of questions to make sure that it sounds like they really need a traveler and they're not going to cancel right before you start.
Yeah, it is really tricky to know, but we try to ask a lot of questions, like Jared mentioned, during the interview to really get a feel. And you may even just ask them like flat out, like, are you actively interviewing for a permanent position? Do you anticipate needing me for the full 3 months or the full 6 months? They may or may not always be fully honest with you because honestly, some of the companies, they were like cutthroat. They might just think, well, I can get you here for a couple weeks to fill in, knowing that I'm going to just give you your notice when we hire somebody instantly. There are some of them that are like that, so they may not fully disclose everything with you, but you can at least try to ask those questions.
Yeah, and we actually worked at a facility where there was several other travelers, and we were in a meeting where the manager was saying like, well, we've got these other travelers, we can just let them go at any time. They were planning to keep us and let the other ones go, and it was just sad to hear that, like knowing that they really didn't care. They were just trying to save as much money as they could, and they didn't care what happened with the travelers.
Yeah, and it really honestly just depends. Like at that facility, they didn't care. They were just like, whatever, it's part of the business. Whereas at the facility where I got canceled, they were actually being really nice to me because Jared was already working there. They needed 2 travelers for a little while, and then they were fortunately, because this is a rural hospital, and they'd been without a permanent therapist for a while for both our positions. So it was actually a really good thing that they were able to hire a permanent therapist. We were happy for them, but they wanted to stay in both of our good graces because if they had just canceled me with no notice, Jared might have put in his notice and we might have just moved on. But they were like, well, we're going to let you work your 30 days and hopefully that'll give you time to figure something else out. So they were really kind to me. So it honestly varies so much in the travel world. It really depends on the facility.
Yeah, there's no one size fits all in anything related to travel. And we get a lot of questions just specifically on Instagram. Lately, we've gotten several questions about like, what is typical for a travel contract in terms of productivity or cancellation or whatever. And there is no typical. I mean, you do have, things that are more often this certain way than others, but everything's variable in travel contracts. Every facility is different, every travel company is different, every traveler is different. So it's very hard to have two of the same situation.
So let's talk about if you get canceled unexpectedly, kind of, the facility blindsides you and they're canceling you unexpectedly. Hopefully they're giving you your notice, and the notice of 14 days or 30 days allows you time to make other plans. What if they don't? What if they don't uphold their end of the deal? We've heard of rare instances where they just said, no, you're done at the end of this week, or you're done today. And you're like, what's the point in this contract I signed that said, you were going to give me 14 or 30 days notice and you didn't?
Yeah.
In rare instances, we have heard that some travelers really felt like they had no repercussion, like the facility just did whatever they wanted, and they were one of those at-will states where they can just fire you for any reason. They don't have to give you a reason, and they felt like they had no repercussions. Hopefully that doesn't happen to you. If it does, you want to at least try to work with your recruiting company. They're the middleman, and see if your recruiter, if your staffing company can help you in some way. Like, can you, try to honor the 14-day agreement that I have with you? Can you try to pay me for I deserve to be paid for those 2 weeks. They can't just cut me without pay. So you at least want to ask those questions.
Yeah, and an important thing to remember there too is that sometimes a facility will just stop paying the travel company. Like they'll just say, all right, we're done with this traveler, we're not paying anymore. That's very unfortunate, of course, but some travel companies, especially bigger ones, they have reserves set aside for situations like that where they might still be able to help you out, because it is a rare and unfortunate thing that happens and they don't want to be on your bad side. So there are some travel companies, especially bigger ones. That's one of the benefits sometimes of working with a bigger company that's able to spread out the risk over a larger pool of travelers of something like that happening, is that they'll have those reserves set aside and they might be able to help you in that situation. We've been in situations like that. So Whitney had a situation where she got injured before a contract, and our travel company, it wasn't anyone's fault. It wasn't the facility's fault. They couldn't use her because she was hurt. But the travel company still agreed to give her money during that time. Not the full pay, but some money to help with costs and things. And that was, we really appreciated that.
I forgot about that actually until I was reading somebody's story on our group earlier today. They were saying that one of the reasons their contract got canceled is they were injured and they weren't able to start the contract. So they obviously had to cancel their contract. I was really lucky that time, again, because Jared was going to be working at the facility and we were already moving there anyway, and they had 2 positions for the both of us. Well, I fell and broke my arm at the end of our prior contract and I wasn't able to start right away. So they were just going to cancel me, but my recruiting company really had my back and they tried to just get them to wait a little longer. So I was able to get them to push back my start date and let me start 4 weeks later. And my travel company still paid me the reimbursements for relocation, and we had bought some scrubs or some clothes for that assignment, so they still reimbursed me for that and a couple other things, even though I wasn't able to get my weekly pay for those first 4 weeks. That I was really lucky that they just didn't cancel me altogether. Yeah. So sometimes these things work out well. You just have to ask and stand up for yourself if those things happen.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions or comments, leave them below. We'll go through all those at the end. Also, if you could, please like the video. The more engagement, likes we get, the more people see it, and we always appreciate that.
Absolutely. We really appreciate if you hit that thumbs up or that heart button and leave us a comment if you're learning anything or if you have questions. Now, what happens when you get canceled and you need to figure out your next move? Okay, well, hopefully you've received your notice and hopefully you've got your 14 or your 30 days to figure it out, or hopefully the travel therapy company is helping you in some way. I would say the biggest hassle is if you get stuck in housing. This is why we always recommend that when you're trying to set up housing, if possible, try to get a month-to-month lease. Even if you signed a 3-month contract or a 6-month contract or a 9-month contract, if it's a school, try not to get locked into a lease, because sometimes apartment complexes and landlords are unforgiving when it comes to leases. They won't let you break your lease if your contract gets canceled early.
Yeah, housing can be a really tough thing on cancellations. And I would say if you run into a situation where you get canceled, especially if it's 14 days and it's kind of a quick turnaround, I would say the very first thing to do would obviously be to contact all the recruiters you're working with and get a feel for what the job market is and if there's any really good prospects for you that are already open. If not, then start having your recruiters look for any contracts within driving distance of where you already are. Because it's always easier to try to take another contract close by, even if it's a little bit of a commute, instead of having to move all your stuff and try to get out of a lease, especially if it's a 3-month lease or something like that. So first, look and see if there's anything open. Consider your housing situation, if you'd be able to move quickly, and then look around the area. And if none of that works, then you have to broaden it and start to look at other options. But always get in contact with all of your recruiters as quickly as possible and see if they have any good prospects for you.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because it really depends on at what stage of your contract you're in. What if you're almost done with your contract anyway? You maybe only had just like a month left of your 3 months, and by the time you do your 14-day notice, you're really only ending your contract 2 weeks early. Well, then you might just cut your losses and say, oh, well, I lost 2 weeks of rent, or maybe I'll just take 2 weeks for fun, and I was already looking for my next contract anyway. If it's more towards the beginning of your contract, then you're really screwed when it comes to housing and the scramble for the job search. So yeah, if you can find another job in the same area and not have to move and change your housing situation, awesome. We recently had someone reach out to us in this situation. So like Jared said, you want to go back to the drawing board with your standard recruiter or recruiters that you work with, but this would be a good instance where you might want to reach out to look at all the hot job boards like ours, or ask someone like us if we know of anybody in the area that might have a contract, and get creative. This is when it really helps to have the type of recruiter. Sometimes it's more like the smaller recruiting companies that are willing to call around, do what's called cold calling, to try to dig up a job in the area, versus if your one recruiter is just like, nope, don't see anything on my list, guess there aren't any jobs there. That doesn't really help you, but there are certain recruiters that will say, okay, we're going to call every facility in that city and try to find you another job.
Yeah, and one other thing that I would really consider, especially if you're locked into a housing situation that you can't easily get out of, is look at any PRN jobs in the area. It might be worth it. Say you only had 4 weeks left anyway in your lease and you were going to leave, and you have your next job already lined up, so you can't really find something to fill that 4 weeks. If you can find just a temporary PRN job and stay in that same area and just work, 20 hours a week or something like that, just to make a little bit of money, then sometimes that's a good option too. And so all of these situations are very variable depending on how long into the contract you are, how many jobs are available around the area, what your next job assignment is looking like, if you already have that planned or not. So it's going to vary a lot, but for the most part, the limiting factor is housing. So if you're locked in there.
Yeah, and with the housing, hopefully, we always try to be very upfront if we have a landlord situation about the fact that we're healthcare workers. Sometimes they'll be flexible and work with you, and maybe they'll prorate your month or let you end it, or if it's an apartment complex, sometimes they just have a fee you have to pay, but sometimes that could be an entire month's rent. But paying 1 month's rent versus 3 that you're not living there is better than nothing. So yeah, those are your biggest things that you're having to tackle in this situation to try to figure out what your next move is. Yeah. And it can be really stressful, but again, fortunately, it's not that common, but these are some strategies you guys can employ. If anybody's watching that has dealt with this situation before, if you're an experienced traveler, we would love to know what your experience has been with being canceled by the facility, and what the repercussions were. If your recruiting company helped you out, please leave us a comment and let us know.
Yeah. So any questions about that? That's pretty much everything to do with if the company cancels. Now let's get into what happens if you want to cancel the contract, and under what circumstances we would recommend doing that.
Yep. So I think, there's a few different reasons why someone might want to cancel a contract. For example, if you get there and it's not at all what you signed up for, like if there's a productivity problem, or they're sending you to multiple facilities and you only agreed to work at one building, or things just aren't going the way that you anticipated them going. Of course, the first line of defense there is try to work it out with your manager if you can, but we've definitely heard so many people that said, I just can't do this. This is not what I signed up for. That would be one reason. The other reason would be if it was something unethical. If there was something unethical like Medicare fraud or illegal billing practices and things like that you just absolutely cannot carry on, in your heart of hearts and, within ethical and legal guidelines, that would be a reason that you might want to cancel. Of course, if you have some kind of family emergency come up, a death in the family, or you have some kind of medical emergency or something that prevents you from working, that would definitely be a reason that would come up. I think all of those reasons are very valid for you to consider canceling the contract, or in the case of if you injure yourself and you cannot work, or there's a family member that you just can't make other arrangements, I think those are very valid reasons to cancel.
Yeah. So in some situations where we would not recommend canceling, we've gotten some questions about this in the past. Some travelers look at that cancellation notice as just like an out clause. Like, oh, well, I can just cancel at any time. I've got this 2 weeks, no big deal. Don't look at it that way. Remember that the facility is relying on you a lot to take care of the patients. If you leave, they have to bring in another traveler. So if it's a situation where, say, another job pops up that you want to take, but you still have 8 weeks on your contract, don't put in your notice just to take that contract. That makes travelers look bad. And if we want facilities to be nice to us and be respectful of giving us notice and not canceling us for stupid reasons, then we don't want to do that to them either. So think about those things. And we've also heard some travelers that are like, well, my family's going on vacation. I'm just going to cancel this contract and go on a vacation. Don't do those kind of things. Be respectful of the facility's time and think about the patients that, you would be leaving behind and how they have to scramble to bring someone else in if you leave.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have heard of some travelers that just do it anyway. They say, you know what, I'm going to use the rules as they exist and I'm going to put in my notice because I found a better job, a higher paying job. Or maybe I only took this job because I couldn't find the job I really wanted. And then, as it always works out, 3 weeks later, the job you really wanted and the place you really wanted comes around. Personally, we don't think that's the most ethical thing to do. We don't think that's the most professional thing to do. It's up to you to decide for yourself in each situation if that's the right thing for you to do. But I do know that if you do things like that we would deem unprofessional, you definitely risk burning bridges with the staffing company, with the recruiter that you're working with, and with that facility. And you definitely could get kind of blacklisted, so to speak, with both the staffing company and the company the facility that you're working with.
Yeah, if it's a legitimate reason, I think the staffing company and the facility will understand. But if it's a reason I'm going to take this other job, then definitely the staffing company is going to lose money on that. And in some situations, the facility will try to push back on paying the travel company even hours that you did work, because they're like, well, they put us in a hard position. We're not going to pay you all this money. And so the staffing company really might not want to work with you after that. And let's say the facility is like a hospital system. The hospital system might not want to work with you after that. So really try to avoid that unless it's a situation where you just can't avoid it.
Absolutely. And I think the other situations are a gray area. If it's something that you just you don't really like the facility, you're not getting along with your coworkers, or the productivity is tough, try to work it out if at all possible. If it's 13 weeks, even if it's not the best job, you want to try to make it work, maintain your professionalism and try to work it out with your manager if the productivity is not what you agreed to, and all of those things. Hopefully you can come to an agreement, but we have heard of certain circumstances where after trying everything, they talked to their manager, they talked to their recruiter, they tried adjusting their schedule, none of it was working, they just ultimately ended up canceling. At least you tried, you gave it your best effort, and hopefully you at least maintain good terms with your recruiter in that situation. They understand, okay, I understand why you're having to put in your notice. And again, it's kind of up to you, depending on how bad the situation is, if you feel comfortable to work the 14-day or 30-day notice. However, if it's something where you truly feel it's unethical or illegal, that would certainly be grounds to leave the next day and not return, as long as, again, you voice these concerns to your recruiter and try to maintain good terms with them and explain to them what's happening. And most likely, if it's a situation that bad where you're having to put in your notice on the spot because of ethical things, you would probably be reporting that to Medicare or to whoever for fraud or the unethical situations.
Yeah. So those situations don't happen that often, but take those kind of things. If it is a really bad situation, then get out of it. But for the most part, it's more of a gray area, and maybe they're trying to push you for productivity that you don't feel is reasonable. And then in that situation, don't just leave. Don't put your notice in. Try to work it out with the manager first. If you can't work it out with the manager, talk to your recruiter. Say, hey, I'm going to put in my notice if we can't work something out here. And like I said, a lot of times it's in your best interest and their best interest to make it work, so that you don't have to find another contract and they don't have to find another traveler. So a lot of times you can come to an agreement and you don't have to end that contract.
Yeah, and I think another gray area can sometimes be family issues. Now, if it's yourself and you're ill or you're injured and you physically can't work, that's pretty obvious. However, if it's a family member who has fallen ill, or you need to go take care of them, or there's a death in the family, Some recruiters and facilities would try to push you to say, no, you can't just leave because of that. And depending on your personal situation, you might say, well, maybe it's something where I feel comfortable just taking a couple of days off to go to a funeral and then return to work. But you know yourself and your family situations best. I don't think that any recruiter is going to push back with you if you genuinely say to them, this is having a major impact on my life. I must go take care of my family first. That is completely within your rights, and I think that any recruiter will understand that as long as you handle it professionally. And again, that would be a situation where you have to decide personally, is this a situation where I have the time to work a 14-day notice, or do I just need to leave tomorrow?
Yep, very good points. So we'll go through some questions and comments. If you guys have any questions about any of this, let us know.
Yep. All right, so got a few things here. Nikki, hi Nikki, thank you for joining us. Nikki says, I canceled a contract because of a death in the family. I ended up paying a month of rent. It was better than what was in the rental agreement, which would have been over $6,000.
Yeah, that's a tough rental agreement. You know, a lot of people want to work these high-paying jobs, and sometimes what people don't realize about the really high-paying jobs is they're usually in high-cost living areas where rent is very expensive and also competitive. You know, obviously, the more competitive rent is, the higher it drives up prices, and that's why you have those high rents. And so a lot of times landlords can really dictate leases exactly how they want, and they will say, no, I'm not going to do month to month, and you don't have a choice. So in some of these really high cost living areas, you can get stuck with a 3-month lease paying $2,000 a month, and if you get canceled, that's a really tough situation to be in.
Yeah, Nikki, I'm really glad you were able to make that work and go be with your family in that situation. It sounds like you were able to work out something with the landlord. Hopefully they were more understanding, because it sounds like they came down on those fees. And I think, yeah, you definitely have to advocate for yourself. Hopefully if you voice it as, this is out of my control, I'm a healthcare worker, I'm here to help, I'm a contract employee, I would certainly, normally I would never cut a lease short or a contract short, but there's these extenuating circumstances. So, and
most people are good, and they'll work with you. I think it's pretty rare to find people that just are like, no, I'm just going to take your money and I don't care about that.
Yep. George, hi George, thanks for joining. George is a veteran PTA traveler. He says, I like to think I'm a traveling veteran, and I have only had 2 contracts canceled. That is awesome, George.
George is over 20 contracts, I think.
Yeah, I don't know how many years that is. Probably like
a lot of
6
years.
or 7 or 8.
More than us.
He says, during one contract, I was given a 30-day notice on my second week, and another one I was canceled 3 days before I was supposed to start. I was actually in the middle of unpacking my car and moving in when I got the phone call. That's a bummer, George.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
That is definitely tough. All right, let's see what other comments and questions we got here, guys. Alrighty. Whew, lots of names. Nick says, Nick is also an experienced traveler. He says, or if they cancel you, just show up to work the first day you're not supposed to be there and pretend it never happened. That's one strategy, Nick, but they'll probably just won't pay you. Oh, he also says, use fear as your main tactic so they don't dare ever even think about canceling you. Let them know who's in charge. Let us know how that works out for you, Nick. Thomas says, I just signed a contract for my second travel job that will start as soon as I finish my current contract. Congratulations, Thomas. Glad to hear it.
There are so many people getting contracts right now. The market's really picking up, and we're getting very excited about it.
Yeah, we're going to do our job market update in 2 weeks from now, so stay tuned for that. We're really excited. All right. It doesn't look like anybody put any other questions in the comment section. So let us know if you do have any other questions or any comments. If you guys want to read other people's stories, if you're not already in one of our groups, we have our Travel Therapy Mentor community group and our Healthcare Travelers on Fire group. Both of those groups, people gave a lot of good feedback in our poll about their personal experiences and kind of all the different nuances and stories. Every situation is going to be different, but hopefully we gave you guys a good summary tonight. Hopefully none of this bad stuff happens to you, but hopefully now you understand a little bit better of how to navigate those situations if they do come up.
Yep. Again, if you guys could like this video, we'd really appreciate it. Also, follow us on Instagram. We're going to be making the announcement soon about the giveaway, both giveaways, so get ready for those. We're really excited to give some product and money back to you guys.
Yep. Awesome. Have a great night, guys, and thank you for joining us.
Yep. Take care.